Good morning, guys. It's tech time, and in today's video, we are going to be counting down the top 10 budget smartphones you can buy after this lockdown. The list will be in order of least expensive to most expensive, and the price will be of the baseline models of the phones. All phones in the list will cost under $500. So, if you like this kind of content, please be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. And if you want to buy these phones, link in the description. Now, let's get started with our first phone on this list, and that is the Samsung Galaxy M10s. This Samsung phone is on the bottom of the list because it is a Samsung phone, I guess, that cost around $189. It is a phone which has a plastic back with a plastic side. The display is a 6.4-inch water drop notch AMOLED display with a resolution of 720 into 1560, making this one of the best display at this price point. The chipset inside the phone is an Exynos 7884B, which is a chipset at the lower end of performance, but we can't complain much for the price. The phone has two cameras on the rear. One is the main 13 megapixel camera and the other is a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera. The front facing camera is an 8 megapixel sensor. Both the front and rear facing cameras can record up to 1080p at 30 frames per second. But you should not expect much from this camera. So if camera is the main priority, then this is not for you. The phone has a 4000 mAh battery, which is good. The phone also supports 15-watt fast charging. The baseline model has 3 GB of RAM and 32 GB of storage. Now, ninth one is the Xiaomi Redmi Note 8 Pro. So the Redmi Note 8 Pro cost around $199. It is a phone that was made of glass and plastic sides. The phone has a 6.53-inch water drop notch LCD display with a resolution of 1080 into 2340. The CPU that runs the device is the MediaTek Helio G90T. The performance is not the best, but more than usable. The phone has 4 cameras in the rear, which is a 64 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth camera. It can also record video up to 4K 30, while the front facing camera has a single 20 megapixel main camera that can record up to 1080p at 30 frames per second. The whole phone is powered by a 4500 mAh battery, so the phone can last up to the time before you go to bed. The phone supports 18 watts fast charging, so it should be ready by the time you wake up in the morning. That said, the baseline models come with 64 GB of storage and 6 GB of RAM. Now, let's move on further down the list. Next comes the Realme 6. The Realme 6 cost around $249. The back and frame is made of plastic, so they could cut cost, but they are able to make up for that in the display section. The phone has a 6.5-inch punch hole LCD display with a resolution of 1080 into 2400, and the best part of this phone is a 90 Hz refresh rate display, making this the only phone which has 90 Hz display at this low of a price. The phone is run by the MediaTek Helio G90T, so the performance is good enough. The phone has 4 rear cameras. Those are the main 64 megapixel camera, the 8 megapixel ultra wide camera, the 2 megapixel macro, and 2 megapixel depth. The video can record up to 4K 30 coming to the front. Single camera, which is a 16 megapixel main camera, which can record up to 1080p at 30 frames per second. The phone has a 4300 mAh battery, which can charge to 100% in 55 minutes because of the 30-watt fast charger. The baseline models come with 4 GB of RAM and 64 GB of storage. Next comes the Samsung Galaxy M31. We have another Samsung phone, which is the Samsung Galaxy M31, which is a phone that cost around $289. The phone is made of plastic on both the back and frame. The display on this phone is also really good, as it has a 6.4-inch Super AMOLED display with a resolution of 1080 into 2340. This makes the display the best part of this phone. This phone is run by the Exynos 9611, which is a good chipset in the mid-tier of the Exynos mobile chipset processors. The phone has 4 rear-facing cameras. First is the main 64 megapixel camera, then comes the 8 megapixel ultra-wide camera, then comes the 5 megapixel macro camera, and lastly the 5 megapixel depth camera. The front-facing camera has a single 32 megapixel camera. Both the rear and the front camera can record up to 4K 30 frames, which is awesome. The phone also has a gigantic 6000 mAh battery, which is the highest battery capacity in this list. Though it will take the phone a long time to charge, as it only supports up to 15 watt of fast charging. The baseline model has 6 GB of RAM and 64 GB of storage. Next we have the Samsung Galaxy A51. Here comes another Samsung phone called the Samsung A51, which costs around $295. It is also a plastic made phone. The phone has a 6.5-inch punch-hole Super AMOLED display with a resolution of 1080 x 2400. The phone has an Exynos 9611 processor, which is good enough to game on the phone with medium graphics. The phone has a total of 5 cameras, with the rear camera having 4 cameras. The main camera is a 48 megapixel sensor. Then we have the 12 megapixel ultra wide, then a 5 megapixel macro and depth camera. The camera can record up to 4K 30. The front camera has a 32 megapixel sensor which can record at 1080p at 30 frames per second. The phone has a 4000 mAh battery and can charge at the speed of 15 watts. The baseline model has 4 GB of RAM and 64 GB of storage. Now comes the Poco Phone X2. The Poco Phone X2 cost around $315. The phone has a glass back and aluminum frame. The display is a 6.67-inch punch-hole LCD display that has a refresh rate of 120 Hz and is the only phone in this whole list to have a display with this kind of refresh rate. The phone is powered by the Snapdragon 730G, which is Snapdragon's gaming series chipset. So if you want to game, this is a phone you need to check out. The phone has 4 cameras in the rear. That is the main 64 megapixel camera, the 8 megapixel ultra wide, and the 2 megapixel depth and macro camera. The front has 2 cameras, one main 20 megapixel camera and another 2 megapixel depth camera. The rear camera can record up to 4K 30, while the front can record up to 1080p at 30 frames per second. The Poco also has a 4500 mAh battery which can charge 100% in 68 minutes because the phone supports 27 watt fast charging. The baseline model has 6 GB of RAM and 64 GB of storage. To find more about this phone, we have an unseen review of it up in the channel, so if you want to see it, check the card in the top right. Next is the Realme 6 Pro. The Realme 6 had already come on the list, but its better version, the Realme 6 Pro, which costs around $349, is also great. We are talking about a glass back and plastic frame with a 6.6-inch punch-hole LCD display which supports 90 Hz refresh rate with a resolution of 1080 x 2400. The phone is powered by the Snapdragon 720G, which is good for gaming and performs similar to the Snapdragon 730G. The phone has 4 rear cameras. The first one is the main 64 megapixel camera, then comes the 12 megapixel telephoto camera and the 8 megapixel ultra wide, and lastly we got the 2 megapixel macro camera. In the front we have a 16 megapixel camera and an 8 megapixel ultra wide camera, which I think is a better option than a depth camera. The battery is a 4300 mAh battery which can charge up to 100% in just 57 minutes because of the 30 watt charger. In the box, the baseline model comes with 6 GB of RAM and 64 GB of storage. Now we have the top 3 phones left, which are all above $350. So let's get started with number 3. The third phone in this list is going to be the Samsung Galaxy A71, which cost around $364. The Samsung Galaxy A71 has a plastic back and frame with a 6.7-inch punch-hole Super AMOLED display. So if you want the best display under $500, this is the phone that is a must to check out. The resolution of the screen is 1080 x 2400. The phone is powered by the Snapdragon 730, which should not be confused by the Snapdragon 730G variant. The phone has a 64 megapixel main camera, a 12 megapixel ultra wide, and two 5 megapixel macro and depth camera. The front of the phone has a single 32 megapixel main camera. The battery is a 4500 mAh, which can be charged at the speed of 25 watts by the charger. The baseline model has 6 GB of RAM and 128 GB of storage. Second comes the iPhone SE 2020. This phone cost about $399, and it is for those who are embedded in the Apple ecosystem or who just want a budget small iPhone. The iPhone SE 2 is made out of glass and has an aluminum frame. The phone has a 4.7-inch thick bezel LCD display with a resolution of 750 x 1334. The phone is powered by the insanely powerful Apple A13 processor. So if you are looking for performance and don't mind iOS as much, then the iPhone SE 2 is a good choice. The phone has a single 12 megapixel camera that can record up to 4K 60, and another single front facing camera that is a 7 megapixel sensor and can record at 1080 at 30 frames per second. The only bad part about this phone is the battery, which is only 1821 mAh battery, which can charge up to 50% in 30 minutes with an 18-watt charger. But the phone comes with a 5-watt charger, so it could be more slow. This is also the only phone in the list that has wireless charging. The baseline model has 3 GB of RAM and 64 GB of storage. Now lastly on the list we have the TCL 10 Pro. The TCL 10 Pro is a phone that costs around $449. It has a glass back and an aluminum frame. The phone is powered by the Snapdragon 675, which is a bit inferior to the 730G, but not by a long margin. The TCL Pro has 4 cameras on the back. Those are the 64 megapixel main, the 16 megapixel ultra wide, the 5 megapixel macro, and the 2 megapixel depth camera. The front facing camera is a 24 megapixel camera. The phone has a 4500 mAh battery that can charge up to 50% in 35 minutes by the 18-watt fast charger. The baseline model has 6 GB of RAM and 128 GB of storage. So this is the end of our list of the top 10 budget phone in my opinion, and I will put all the links in the description. Also, I want to say Happy Eid Mubarak to all my Muslim viewers and a happy day to all my non-Muslim viewers. And as always, goodbye.